everyone. Welcome to MIT Press Live, a new virtual event series brought to you by the MIT Press. My name is Hannah Nyren. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at the MIT Press, and I will be your host for this series. Today, we're speaking with a very special author, Anissa Ramirez, who has written The Alchemy of Us. Hi, Anissa. How are you doing?
Hey, everybody. How are you? How are you doing, Hannah?
Great. So, Anissa, could you introduce yourself in a sentence or two?
Sure, I'll keep it brief. My name is Anissa Ramirez, and I'm a materials scientist, and I'm also a science writer.
Great. So, tell us a little bit about your book, The Alchemy of Us.
Oh, I can't wait to tell you about this book. This book is a stealth material science book, but you can't tell. It really is a book about technology, and what we'll talk about today is how technology has shaped us over the last couple of generations.
Awesome. So what inspired your book?
Well, that's a good question. I'm a material scientist, and I knew a lot about material science, but I never knew about its impact throughout history. And I wanted to learn more, and I would share things with friends, and they would say, oh, that sounds interesting. And then I'd learn more, and then they'd say it's interesting. So it just kind of became this culmination where it turned into a book.
Great. So now you know a little bit about the book, but we're going to talk about it a lot more. Anissa has a whole talk for you. But before we jump into what I'm sure will be a very fascinating talk, I want to let our audience know why this particular event is so important to us. Maybe some of you know that we had a big tour lined up for Anissa, huge. And while many of the bookstores that were hoping to launch this book will really be struggling right now, as a lot are closed down and unable to get products to people. So we've put together some information on how you can support independent bookstores. So if you haven't purchased The Alchemy of Us yet, we have a list of a few different ways you can get your hands on the book. I'm going to share that in the chat so that you can access it. But the story with all the links is at mitpress.mit.edu/blog/stay save lives, keep reading. It's a long one. Anyway, so I just wanted to get that in before we begin. But Anissa, you can take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you so much to the MIT Press for putting together this lovely event so that I'm able to speak to you safely in my home as you are also safely in your home. I hope that everybody is as healthy and safe. I'm really looking forward to telling you a little bit about my new book, The Alchemy of Us: How Humans and Matter Transform One Another. Now, what I want to do is I just want to provide a little bit of a disclaimer. I've been thinking about this talk for a while, and it's being broadcast all over the planet. And it dawned on me that I'm going to sound a little funny to people. For people who are across the pond, I'm going to sound funny to them because, well, I have an American accent. And for people who are in the United States, I'm going to sound a little funny to you because, well, I have a slight New Jersey accent. But what's not funny is the way that I use language. And what I found while writing The Alchemy of Us is the way that I use language was shaped by technology. And that technology was the telegraph. Oh yeah, it wasn't that long ago that the telegraph was the main means of instant communication. But it had a fault. It couldn't handle a lot of messages back and forth. And so messages became shorter, sentences became shorter, and the notion of short declarative sentences, that became the American style, which is a style I embraced. So I learned that the way that I speak was shaped by technology. And I would like to invite you to look at other ways that technology has shaped us in our time today. So what I'm going to do in our time today is I want to talk to you a little bit about the origin story of the book, share with you my vantage of how I came about thinking about the book, and then we're going to delve deep into how a technology shaped us. As for my vantage, well, I'm a material scientist. And look, I know you don't know what that. I know you don't know what it is. Please don't act like you know what it is. I know you don't. I go to a lot of parties. People don't know what it is. My mother doesn't know what a material science is. And I liken material science to my home state of New Jersey because neither one get respect. How is that? Well, both of them are overshadowed by their neighbors. For New Jersey, They are New York and Philadelphia. And for material science, they are chemistry and physics. Where chemistry and physics overlap is where material science sits. Material science is interested in how atoms bond, so that's the chemistry part, and then how those bonds translate into materials will behave, and that's the physics part. Now, I have to share with you that when I first heard about material science, I wasn't interested in it, not at all. Why? Well, it was a prerequisite course, which I translated as boring. However, my professor said something that completely blew me away on the first day. He said, the reason why we don't fall through the floor, the reason why my sweater is blue, and the reason why the lights work all has to do with the interaction of atoms. And if you can figure out how they do that, you can get them to do new things. Now, when he said that, I stopped listening to him, which is a no-no. You should always listen to your professor. But I stopped listening to him because I was just looking around me and I was starting to say, yeah, he's kind of right. I looked at the pencil in my hand. It was able to create a mark because the carbon atoms were sliding past each other, just like he said. And I looked at my shoes. My shoes were comfortable because the molecules sort of looked like springs, which brought a comfort to my feet. And then I looked at my glasses. My glasses were able to let my eyes see because they bent light to my distant retinas. This guy was telling me something that made the whole world make sense to me. And it was that moment that I decided that I was going to be a material scientist, which is what you have in front of you today. So that's my origin story. But let me share with you a little bit about the origin story of the book. Now, I have been a material scientist for a long time. And just like any relationship, things were getting a little stale. I was learning a lot of things, but didn't have the same level of excitement. So I decided that I was going to do something new. And for me, that was take some glass blowing classes. There's a studio not far from my house. Now, I was excited to take a glass blowing class. I was so excited because the day that I visited, my instructor showed me what he could do. He got some glass out of the furnace and he tugged on it about 4 or 5 times and he made a galloping horse. It was beautiful. I said, I want to be around that guy. That guy's amazing. But I also was a little afraid because he said something like, watch out, don't step on the hot glass. It's going to melt a hole in your shoe. Melt a hole in my shoe? Does OSHA know about this place? So I was very afraid, but I was also very excited. I wanted to learn a new thing about this old material. I wanted to connect the abstract thoughts I knew about glass and apply them in new ways. So I was so excited. But I also took a very cautious approach when I went to glass blowing classes because I just knew that there was a strong chance that I was going to get hurt. You see, I come from a long line of people who are very, very clumsy. And so I knew that if someone was going to get hurt, it was going to be me. So I just had a very timid approach to this class. So whenever it was my turn to work with the glass, I took a very cautious approach. I would get my pipe and I would dip it into the vat of hot molten glass, and I would take out a small dollop, and then I would blow a small bubble and then fashion a small vase. I had about, I want to say, 24 vases made by this cautious approach. And I would give them away to friends, and friends would say, hey, this is beautiful. Why don't you make a bigger piece? And I would be like, oh, heck no. Do you realize how hard it is, how scary it is to do this stuff? Please enjoy my small glass piece, because that's what I'm able to do. However, there was one Wednesday night that I went to glass blowing class, and I didn't care to be so safe. No. See, there were a lot of layoffs going on at work. There was a lot of crying, a lot of hugging. I came to glass blowing class completely raw. So the approach that I took for glass blowing class in the past, I didn't do this time. This time, I got my pipe and I put it deep into that vat of hot glass. And I pulled out a lot of glass, nearly maxing out my muscles. And I blew hard, putting all my frustration onto the glass. And I blew a huge bubble. And then I did things I had never done before. I had seen my friends do, which is swing the glass. And when I swung the glass, it became longer. And then I spun the glass. And when I did that, the glass became wider. This, my friends, was turning out to be the best glass piece I had ever made. And as I came back to myself, I said, this is amazing. This glass piece is amazing. And my student and my classmates were looking at me and they're like, Anissa, that glass piece is amazing. And I'd be working on it. I'm like, I know, this is fantastic. Now, I had one more step. All I had to do was put my glass vase into the furnace for a short amount of time, pull it out, and then remove it off my pipe and put it into the area that it cooled. But I was so enamored with my piece, and I was talking to my colleague, that as I put it into the furnace, I'm still having a conversation. I lost track of time. When I took it out and realized that it had been in the furnace for too long, it came out a bright orange, and what was hanging off my pipe like this was now hanging off like this. Okay. So with the little bit of glass blowing knowledge that I had, what I decided to do is, well, all you need to do is just rotate it 180 degrees and it will right itself. And it did, but it kept going because it was so hot and molten. So all I did is I rotated it again, and it kept going back on its new lower side. So this is all I really knew what to do. I said, well, I wish you would just stop doing this. I hope you cool, but it just kept falling on its new lower side. Well, after doing this many times, the glass piece was just not impressed with my skill. It just rotated off the pipe and fell on the floor. Boom, there it was. Now, my instructor had been watching what had been going on for the last couple of minutes, and he saw what happened. He ran over. He had heat-resistant gloves. He picked it up. He reattached it to my pipe. He put it into the furnace, pulled it out, opened up the flattened opening. He also rounded the side that had landed where it had landed. He gave it to me. I worked on it a little bit. And then I did what I finally should have done before, which is put it into my furnace for a short amount of time, pull it out, then remove it and put it into the area where it cooled. Now, as it was cooling and as I calmed down from this event, I started thinking about humans and materials. I was shaping the glass, but the glass was actually shaping me. It completely distracted me from my very bad day, and I was actually in a good mood. And this caused me to think a little bit about how materials and matter and materials and humans have been interacting with each other over the eons. So this was the birth of my book. Now, what I want to do is I want to share with you how I went about writing the book. Now, as a material scientist researcher, I took a different approach to materials and than I am in writing the book. As a researcher, I was interested in the future. And so I looked at materials that would make things stronger, better, faster, with apologies to the $6 million man. But in my research, smaller for nanotechnologies and smarter for smarter materials. And so I would go into a special clean room and wear very clean suits, look at a microscope, and look for something new. And you can think of it as a periscope where I was facing in the direction that I was going. I was looking at materials in the future. But now, to explore materials in the past, that periscope had to change its direction and go in this direction and look at how materials have been shaped, how we got to this moment. And I had to also go to different locations in order to do that. In the past, I would go into a clean laboratory, but now I was going to dusty archives and looking at old papers that would crumble in my hand. And again, I was looking for something new. Let me share with you what a very, very good day in the archives looks like. Ordinary day or a bad day, well, they kind of look the same, which is like this. You're looking at a book and you're just turning pages and you're making notes. Not much to write about. They won't make a movie about that. But let me share with you what an extraordinary day looks like. Now, I was looking at the chapter on timekeeping and the importance of watches and how they shape culture. And so I was looking for something new about that to share with my readers. Now, I had already found how time and clocks had shaped us. Oh yeah, I found that we used to sleep differently. It's true, yep. Before the Industrial Revolution, we slept in two different segments. We slept for 3.5 hours, woke up for about an hour, and then went to sleep for another 3.5 hours. These segments were called first and second sleep, and everybody slept that way. But the way we slept changed. And what changed it was two things, clocks and also artificial lights. Well, clocks made it that we had to wake up earlier, and lights made it that we went to bed later. And so these two segments of sleep became consolidated, and it resembles how we sleep today. So I found that already, and I was so excited because now I knew about the impact of timekeeping. But I was still looking for a way to draw people in and still looking for a story. So I had stacks and stacks of books about timekeeping, and what I'm doing is I'm reading one book and I'm opening it up and then putting it on this pile over here. And my friends, I'm not coming up with much. I mean, timekeeping is well researched, but I'm not coming up with anything. It's a little dry. But I was reading this very thick book, and I remember that moment. It was about a page, about 2/3 of the way down, I saw one sentence, and that sentence says, in the 19th century, there was a woman in London who sold time. I said, what? And I said it loud like that, and I'm in a library, and everybody's looking down, and they look up, and they're looking to see who made that noise. And because I didn't want them to think it was me, I also start looking around and say, hey, be quiet, so they didn't know it was me. I said, what? All right, I don't have to whisper now. I said, what? There's a woman who sold time? Yeah, there's a woman who sold time. This is what I found out. In the 19th century to the early 20th century, there was a woman named Ruth Belville who had the unusual business of selling time. She would leave her home in Maidenhead, she would make her way over to London and then to the Royal Observatory, walk up a very steep hill in Greenwich to the Royal Observatory. The whole time she was carrying a special pocket watch that she nicknamed Arnold. She would have her pocket watch compared to the standard time that was at the Royal Observatory, and they would give her her certificate, letting her know the difference between her watch and their clock. And then she'd make her way down that very steep hill, make her way over to London, and then she would lend her watch to different businesses that needed to know the precise time. For this unusual business, she was called the Greenwich Time Lady. Now, when you and I need to know the time, we just look at our cell phones. Cell phones get the information from distant atomic clocks, which is transferred through cell phone towers. Well, there weren't any cell phones or cell phone towers in Ruth Belville's day. She was the transmission of the time to these various businesses. And so she would give her watch to different businesses, such as banks and train stations and newspapers, people who needed to know precise time. And her family had been in this business for over 100 years. Now, when I heard about this, I was just blown away. There was a woman who sold time. This is so amazing. I would tell everybody, did you know there was a woman who sold time? I would tell everybody. And I actually got to see Arnold because he's located in the London Museum. And I stood there for about 20 minutes just staring at this clock. But I have to say that moments after I had discovered Ruth, I was excited, but I also got a little angry. I said, how is it that this woman who's so fascinating, who's more fascinating than this thick book that I just read, how is it that she gets reduced to one sentence? That didn't seem right to me. What resonated with me is that I had just seen a movie where it depicted how African-American women mathematicians had made contributions to NASA, and I didn't know about that either. Ruth, too, was a hidden figure, and I wanted to make sure that she got lifted from the pages, and so that we were able to see her story, too. So just like that glass blowing accident changed my posture from looking into the future and looking at the past, Ruth Belville changed the focus so that I would look at little-known inventors in history and in technology and give them their shot to be seen, too. So that is how the book came to be. Now, I've already hinted at technology and how it has shaped us, particularly how it shaped language with the telegraph. I've just hinted how our life was changed with the development of clocks and how we slept differently. But let me delve in now with a technology that has significantly changed us, and it's doing so right now, and we're not even paying attention to it. Why? Because it's a very simple invention, and we just ignore it, and that invention is the light. Now, when you think about the light bulb, the inventor that you usually think about is Thomas Edison, and that would be the name that you see in American textbooks. Now, we know there's a lot to be learned about American textbooks. There's a lot missing in these American textbooks. But what we know for certain is that there were many other inventors that made an incandescent bulb before Edison. That said, let's look at him as a case study and look at why he developed his light bulb the way he did. And more importantly, what was the impact of his invention? So let's do that. Okay, so when we think about Edison, you may see in movies, and it may show him as having just a stroke of light as an inspiration coming up with the idea for the light bulb. That is not how it went down. He actually visited a little-known scientist named William Wallace in Connecticut. William Wallace had created an electric light. His light was a little different than what Edison had created. William Wallace had created an arc lamp, which composed of two carbon blocks that were separated from each other and connected into a circuit. When he turned on the circuit, electricity bridged between those two, and that's what created the light. William Wallace created an arc lamp. Now, arc lamps had been around, but this was one of the first in America. Edison saw this, and he was completely enamored. He's like, this is fantastic. I need to jump into this electric light game. But he also found something fascinating, what he didn't see in this electric light. William Wallace's lights were great, but they were far too bright. You couldn't imagine having them in the home. You would turn on the lights and you'd be like, hey, honey, are you there? I can't see you. Like they were just too bright. They weren't able to be dimmed. So Edison left Connecticut, went back to Menlo Park in New Jersey, my home state, and began to embark on another form of electric lights. His approach was the incandescent bulb that we know today. That is that thin wire that we see under a glass bulb where light comes by electricity going through that wire. Now, Edison was in the business of trying to figure out what was the appropriate wire that could glow. And he tried a lot of different materials. He eventually settled on platinum. Now, from a material science point of view, platinum was a good choice. Electricity is going through the wire, so that meant there was going to be very high temperatures experienced, and platinum could handle those things. So that was good. The other thing about platinum is that platinum doesn't react much, and so soot won't form on the wire, which will dim the light. So that was a good choice too. So Edison tried many different circuits to get this platinum wire to work, and he couldn't get it to work. He just couldn't. He couldn't get it to glow brightly. And it had nothing to do with Edison's ingeniousness. It had to do with the material science of the platinum itself. Platinum is a conductive material, and what Edison needed was a resistive material. Let me explain what that means. If we think of a wire, electrical wire, as a pipe, we can say that electricity will flow through the wire and water will flow through the pipe. Now, if water flows easily through the pipe, well, that's a conductive pipe. If electricity flows easily through the wire, that too is a conductive. Well, platinum was a conductive material, so electricity went through it very easily. Let's say that we get this water pipe, and this time we put marbles and pebbles in it. This time the water has a tougher time going through it. Let's make a resistive material. Electricity has a tougher time going through it. The electrons bounce into atoms, they bounce into surfaces, they create heat, and as a result of that heat, they glow. See, what Edison needed was a resistive material, and platinum was just not going to work. So what he needed to do was actually change the material that he was using, and he eventually went and chose carbon. Carbon is a very resistive material. So what Edison did was get a cotton thread. He baked it to remove all the non-carbon parts. He made a circuit, a little wire, put that under a glass globe, took out all of the air, and he applied electricity to it. And what he got was he got a light bulb that eventually glowed for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then eventually 40 hours before it went dim. So that is the birth of the American lights. Okay, so Edison's created these lights. We now have lights available to us all the time. How does this impact us? That's the point of the alchemy of us. Well, in order to impress upon you what happens, I want to share with you a summertime tradition that I used to embark on as a kid. Long, long time ago, when I was small, one of my favorite times as the sun set was to look in my backyard and wait. I would wait for these little sparks of light to show up. They're about as big as my finger. And as soon as I saw one of those sparks of light, I would run into the house, grab a jar that already had holes poked into the top, run back outside and try and capture one of those sparks of light. Those sparks of light, my friend, were fireflies, and I absolutely loved them. Now, fireflies live near my house here too, and I've kind of noticed over the course of the last couple of years that the number of fireflies has been decreasing. And I asked an expert about this because, well, that's what I do. And she told me that, yeah, the number of fireflies are decreasing. Well, I said, why? And she said, because of the lights. I said, explain yourself. This is what she told me. Fireflies communicate with each other through a Morse code of flashes, and the lights are impacting this. So let me run the scenario of what was going on in my backyard that I knew nothing about. There's a female firefly who's on a blade of grass, and there's a male firefly who's flying about waist high. And he will flash to her a message that's loosely interpreted as this: I'm a male and I'm a photonous green eye. I'm a male and I'm a photonous green eye. He's announcing himself and telling the fireflies around him the specific type of firefly he is. Female firefly, she'll look up, and if she likes what she sees, which is about 50% of the time, she'll flash back, I like you. He will drop like a rock to her vicinity, and they will meet, and they will be future fireflies. That's all I need to say about that. Okay, let's change this scenario. This time, female firefly on a blade of grass, male firefly about waist high, And now we have a street light. So male firefly enters and announces himself. I'm a male, I'm a photonous green eye. I'm a male, I'm a photonous green eye. Female firefly who's on a blade of grass, she looks up. Is anybody there? She can't see him. Why? Because the lights are completely eclipsing him. She can't see him. So she doesn't flash back, and so there's no future fireflies. Let's try this scenario one more time. Female firefly, blade of grass, male firefly flying about waist high, and again, the street lamp. Male firefly announces himself again. I'm a male, I'm a photonous green eye. I'm a male, I'm a photonous green eye. Female firefly, she looks up. She can see him, but she's not too impressed. No. Female fireflies like male fireflies with bright lanterns. His lantern's not looking that bright. Why? Because the street light is making it look dimmer than it is. So she doesn't flash back, no future fireflies. This is very, very sad. This is very, very sad. The lights are impacting the fireflies that I love. But fireflies are not the only creature that are being impacted by the lights. We are. Oh yeah. I've talked to many different experts, and they've impressed upon me that we are impacted by the lights because we're connected to the lights. One researcher told me that we can be considered to be two organisms. And I said, well, stop right there. You've just explained a lot of my friends. But I said, no, continue. What do you mean by we are two organisms? What he said to me is that we have a daytime mode and we have a nighttime mode. In the daytime, we have a high metabolism, high temperature, and there's a lot of growth hormone going through our bodies. In the nighttime mode, we have all of those things are now reduced, and we're sort of in a rest or repair mode. How the body knows what mode to be in, daytime, nighttime, nighttime, daytime, is because of the lights. In order to understand that, we have to think about our eye. Now, deep in our eye is the retina. The retina gets that message for light information and goes down the optic nerve to the brain where it's translated and converted into vision, what we understand as vision. But recently, and by recently, we found just in the 21st century, that the eye has a little trick that we didn't even know about it. Oh yeah. Ends up that the eye has a special photoreceptor that doesn't contribute to vision. It's just a detector, and it's on the lookout for blue light. When it sees blue light goes down the optic nerve to the brain, to another part of the brain, and it's told to stop secreting melatonin. Melatonin gets shut off. Melatonin is a chemical compound that tells all of our cells to be in nighttime mode. And so when it's shut off, we enter into daytime mode. So in brief, blue light, daytime mode. Now, long ago when our ancestors were alive, they lived by sunlight, which was rich in blue light, and then they went to bed and worked under candlelight, which doesn't have blue and richer in red. So they had a daytime mode, and then they had a nighttime mode, even though they were wide awake. However, we live under electric lights all the time, and so we're in a constant daytime mode until we turn in for bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then we enter into nighttime mode. Now, you may be asking, oh, why is that a big deal? Because that was the question I asked. So why is this a big deal? And scientists actually think it's a big deal because there's already perceivable changes relative to our ancestors. One is that we are slightly taller than our ancestors. Sure, there's a lot of contributions. I know you're thinking about it right now. Definitely nutrition, clean water, and mitigation of diseases and less wars. But another contribution is the electric lights. There's more growth hormone in the body, and the body responds to that, and so we grow. So a friend of mine says we're sort of like plants. I said, sort of, not, but sort of. So we grow. But there's also a downside to having our bodies swimming in growth hormone. That means that the cells will respond to this overstimulation and we'll get growth in ways that we don't want. So researchers have done studies looking at animals, and they've subjected them to various different kinds of artificial lights. And they've seen an increase in a range of ailments from obesity, cardiovascular disease, and some forms of cancer. So that's not good. Now, we can't do those kinds of studies on humans. You don't do studies on humans. But what you can do is you can look at what people do for a living and see how they're sick or why they're sick and make some correlations. And epidemiologists have done that. And they have seen that people who work at night, that is, don't work from 9 to 5, but work under the artificial lights at night, like from security guards to surgeons, have a range of ailments similar to those of the animal studies that I just mentioned, where there was an increase in obesity, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. So, well, I knew nothing about this, and I was completely blown by what I was finding. And I asked researchers, I said, now how am I going to live well under these electric lights? I'm not going back to the days of living by the sun and candlelight. I'm already, I already feel trapped in my home. I'm not going back to olden times. And they said, look, the prescription is actually very, very simple for how you can live healthily under the electric lights. You need bright mornings and dim evenings. You need blue light in the morning and red light in the evening. So in the morning, go out and take a nice walk. The sun, which has lots of blue light, will hit your eye and tell you to go into daytime mode. So that's good. If you can't go outside, well, the other option is to use blue LEDs or compact fluorescent bulbs, which are also strong in the blue. This will put you into daytime mode. As the sun sets, we need to change the type of lights. We should dim those bluer lights and we should use lights that are redder. So we can use red LEDs or incandescent bulbs at this point so that we can go into that necessary nighttime mode, that repair mode. Also, our devices, they too need to be put into nighttime mode. Our cell phones have nighttime modes. We should put them into nighttime mode so that we can go into nighttime mode because they generate a lot of blue light. Also, computer screens and television screens, they also generate a lot of blue light. So what you can do is wear those fancy glasses, or you can go to the hardware store and get those welder glasses that block the blue so that you can go into the necessary nighttime mode. Well, my friends, I knew nothing about this. I know nothing about the impact of lights, and I didn't even expect it because lights seem to be such a simple device. I didn't know they impacted my health. And I didn't know anything about the detrimental impact of blue LEDs because I had another affiliation with blue LEDs. They were the holy grail in material science because they were so hard to make. And we really needed them because we had red LEDs, we had green LEDs, and we needed blue LEDs because all three would create bright white lights, which we could use for displays that we see in Broadway. So blue LEDs were hard to make. And they were so hard to make that the scientists who created them got the Nobel Prize, just to show you how huge they were. But we know now more about the impact of light, and there's things that we can do about it. And when Edison and all of those inventors were working on lights, look, they had one intention, which was to push back the darkness, which was a good thing. I don't like the dark. I'm actually a little afraid of the dark. And by a little afraid, I actually mean a lot afraid of the dark. So it was very important to create lights. But we now know that there's a connection between our health and the lights. And so there's things that we should do to adjust to them. And this is what I try and impress upon you in my book, The Alchemy of Us. I show that there's a linkage between technology and how technology shaped us. And so what I'm also trying to impress upon you is that it's important to put technology under the microscope, even old technologies like the light bulb. Well, my friends, in the time that we spent together, we've looked at technologies. We've seen how they shape us. We've seen that the telegraph has shaped language. We've seen how clocks have modified how we sleep. And we spent a lot of time looking at how the lights are changing us right now. I hope that you are impressed with how we can shape a technology and how it shapes us. I also hope that you will take a new posture when it comes to technology and that you will not just embrace it, but examine it. Just pull it aside and say, okay, tech, now that you're in my life, how's life going to change? And be okay with that answer. It's important that we examine technology. As I say in my parting sentence of The Alchemy of Us, such a thoughtful analysis about the impact of inventions benefits society, not just because it's an entertaining cerebral exercise, but because when coupled with action and social change, it has the potential to help society transcend its condition and favorably further this alchemy of us. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you again to the MIT Press for putting together this lovely program. Thanks also to our sponsors, Gibson Bookstore in Concord, New Hampshire, City Lights in San Francisco, and also Kepler's in Menlo Park, California. I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and just want to also assert to you that, as you know, that this was going to be a huge book tour for MIT and for myself. And unfortunately, we are unable to do that because the world changed. But as heartbreaking as that is, what's also heartbreaking is that a lot of local bookstores are not doing particularly well. And so I encourage you to get a copy of The Alchemy of Us from any of the local bookstores nearby you and show them your support. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the book. And thank you very much again for your attention. Please stay safe.
Great, thank you so much, Anissa. We do already have a few questions that people asked during your talk, so we're gonna start with those. But if anybody else has any questions, I put the directions on how to add something to the Q&A questions at the bottom of the chat. Also in the chat, you can find the link to find the book online, the link to our blog post about all the different places you can order from independent bookstores. Yes, that's the beautiful book right there. Anissa,
I feel smarter already. Gee.
And you wrote it. And there's some other helpful information in the chat while we get into the QA. So, it's not over yet. We have a lot of interesting things to talk about for the next few minutes. So let me get started with some of these questions.
Great.
So two that were asked earlier. One is, I think, the most important question. What is material science? I know.
Oh,
no one knows what you do. It's okay.
What is material science? People have a tough time explaining it, but consider it to be an atom whisperer. We really get to know how atoms interact because we know that atom interactions actually give rise to our world. Atoms, things that you can't even see. If I were to take one of my hairs and whittle it 100,000 times, one of those slivers would be the thickness of an atom. It's something that small that we can't even see with our eye that controls our world. And so material scientists spend a lot of time thinking about how atoms bond, how they connect to each other, how they respond to different things like electricity and pressure and all these other things. And from that can catalog what are the best materials to use for different applications. So let's just say for now that material scientists are atom whisperers.
That's a nice explanation. I like that. So here's another question.
Please.
Can you tell us about something that you knew, but that information changed while researching the book? So maybe you thought you knew, or like you understood something a certain way, and then as you researched the book, you realized it was something different than what you expected.
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think for a half second. Well, there were some characters that I thought I knew about. I thought I knew about Edison really well. I grew up in New Jersey and we're learned to revere Edison. Edison, from what I read, he wasn't the nicest guy. So that was revealing. I also learned a lot about some of the inventions that were happening at Bell Laboratories. I found that Bell Laboratories, which is a place that I used to work, so full disclaimer, they created a lot of stuff, but when I was writing this book, I found that they created a whole lot of stuff, and most of it is buried. Someone can spend their life writing about the inventions that came out of Bell Laboratories. So I thought I knew about Edison, and I thought I knew about the importance of Bell Laboratories, but I was just kind of blown away to learn more about Edison's personality and also the reservoir of inventions that came from Bell Labs. Mm-hmm.
Great, awesome. So here's another question. Oh boy, there are a lot. Let me start with, are you familiar with the work of David Noble?
No, I'll look him up.
Yeah, I'll look him up later.
Okay, I'll look him up. Thank you for letting me know about that. I can't know everything, so thank you.
Someone else asked what's happening now with City Lights. We don't know, but they are reporting on it, so you can probably look that up in the news.
Okay.
How do we get more young people interested in material science?
Well, you can buy a copy. No, I'm sorry. I think that we need to tell more material science stories. And that's the reason why I took my approach to write The Alchemy of Us. I have spent much of my life doing material science demonstrations, and you can definitely get kids excited about the demonstrations. But if you put material science in a context and show how important it is, also if you show that inventors are no different than they are, you know, they're just passionate about something and willing to work hard, I think what that does is that makes a field seem more approachable. Because if we really focus on geniuses or present people as geniuses, people don't feel that they can innovate too. So one of the stealth premises of material science, or about the alchemy of us, is actually to show that innovators are really no different than you and I. It's just that they're willing to work really hard. And I think if we let people know that that's all it takes, hard work and passion about something, that they too can innovate, then people will feel that whatever field, material science or whatever, will be open to them. So more stories, more real stories, and more authentic stories about inventors, I think will make people feel more engaged.
Great. So we're getting so many questions. I'm going to have to be selective because I don't know if we'll be able to get through all of them. But
well, let me propose that I'm on Twitter at Anissa Ramirez. At Anissa Ramirez. I'm trying to remember who I am, but that's who I am. And so you can also send stuff there, and I'll try and answer your questions there too. We'll answer as many as we can now, but you could always follow up then.
All right, thanks. Yeah, we'll see how many we can get in the next 15 minutes, but please ask away on Twitter if you want to.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm a high school history teacher in a STEM school. Is your book at a level that high schoolers could enjoy? And are there any negatives to how we have evolved? So 2 questions. So first of all, is your book at a level that high schoolers would enjoy?
Yes. Yes, okay. I wrote it that way. I was hoping that to help teachers in high schools, not just college teachers, but teachers in high schools, to give them rich stories. Maybe they can, say, give the book as a reading assignment to students. So everything is understandable. I took Einstein's approach that you should explain things that so that your grandparents can understand it. And so nobody's insulted. I just make it very relatable. So yeah, certainly students can understand this. Young high school students can understand it.
And I think your talk today is a good example of kind of the comprehension level needed to understand what's going on. Like it's
absolutely. That's right.
Okay, great. And then the other question is, are there any negatives to how we have evolved to our technology?
Yeah, well, in the last chapter, which is Think, I talk about the evolution of the computer. I found to be fascinating because it ends up this hot-headed mortician undertaker put us on the path to computers, which I didn't know about. But it ends up that scientists are a little concerned because we have computers and the web available to us all the time, that we kind of offload memory onto them. We've become what I call Google brains. Like, I put it this way, if I know my childhood phone number right now, but I don't know my mother's phone number right now. It's because I know where it is. And so that's kind of our approach to information, that we don't necessarily feel like we need to store it, but we just need to know where it's located. And maybe I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I think that's a negative. A lot of people don't. So I talk about that in the last chapter of The Alchemy of Us, chapter 8.
All right, great. So this next one's a fun question because I think you do have some fun ways of doing this that I might have heard before. So how did you do your research? Where did you go to do your research? And what was the most exciting thing that happened at the archives?
Oh, I heart archives now. You should go. They're free. They're just fantastic. I went to beautiful, huge archives like the Library of Congress, and then I went to small ones that were no bigger than a small house for looking for things. Archivists and librarians are fantastic people. Anything you want to know, they will help you. What did I find? When I discovered Ruth Belville, that was fantastic. I discovered some stories about other scientists. One of my favorites was I went to England to learn more about J.J. Thomson, who was the inventor who discovered the electron, and went to this very, very old university where, I'm an American, so, I don't know how custom is there. And I really think I was stepping on a lot of toes, but I was just very eager to learn things. Like, there was a certain way that you had to get information, and anyway, the things I learned about J.J. Thomson just kind of blew me away. J.J. Thomson was this great man who discovered the electron. But what I found is that he was very, very clumsy. And that resonated with me because, as I mentioned, I'm very clumsy. His wife would not let him use a hammer in the house. And when I found that, I said, this is gold. This is going into the book. I have to figure out how to put this in the book. So little things about people's personalities. I was on the hunt for those things. And I recommend going to the archives. I'm sure there's one near you. Go check it out and learn more about history and what's going on near you.
Great. And this question's from someone you know.
Uh-oh. We're
Just
gonna have to do that.
Were there other materials or topics that you originally planned to include in the book that didn't make the final book?
I had planned to do 8 different materials. I had planned to look at different things, but as I read them, I always thought that the material should serve the book. So there was one gentleman who created the next incarnation of Edison's light bulb, and he did fascinating work, but he was not that exciting, and I really tried to make him exciting, so he didn't make the book. There were also some things that were kind of too tangential that I was getting into that didn't serve the book. So Edward Muybridge, who was a photographer who took a picture of a horse galloping mid-stride, he also killed somebody, and I found all kinds of details about that in the Napa Society Historical Archives, and I wrote pages and pages about how he planned it out and how he traveled and he shot this guy. All you get in the book is one sentence because it really didn't serve the story. So there's a lot of things I found, but you know, my thesis is that it always has to serve the story, and if it didn't, well, then I had to kill that darling, as they say.
Great. So there are plenty more questions to choose from. Fortunately, we have 10 more minutes, so
okay.
We don't have to fill the whole time, but I'm sure we can do a couple more.
And again, Twitter, @Anissa Ramirez. Send me your questions, and I will do my best to answer them.
Okay, great. Here's probably a quick one. Are there photos in your book, and do you have a favorite photo?
OMG. Now, I have a lot of photos in this book. I have about 102 photos in this book, and I have to thank the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for providing the funds to put images in this book, because what I learned as a newbie mistake is that photos aren't cheap, but I thought that they were very important to tell the story because, as I said, many of these people that I talk about in The Alchemy of Us have never even, some people don't even have a Wikipedia page. So I wanted to get them into the book to inspire people to know more about them. So in the book, I mean, I can go through this, I could do another virtual live session just doing story time with Anissa. But this one just opened up. Now, this picture, I don't know if you can see it. I'll try and put it as closely as possible. It's one of my favorites because right now we're living in a time where our life is at the whim of presidential tweets. Well, he's not the first. It ends up that there used to be telegrams that came from the White House long ago for telling us about the condition of James Garfield, who had been shot by an assassin. And there wasn't any place to post them because Facebook didn't exist. So people used large chalkboards to say the details about how he was doing. The president slept sweetly, he rested well, he was able to hold his food. But I just found that this is fascinating. This is the original tweet, presidential tweet. So there are many, many other stories. And what I'm doing this week, and we'll probably do for the next couple of weeks, is just kind of talk about the story of each different figure. I'm not able to post the figure because, well, copyright, but I will definitely tell you the origin story of the pictures. So thank you for asking that. And I love looking at the pictures. The book's great, but to me, the pictures are like a photo album because I had to go to so many different places to get these images, and so many little serendipitous things happen to make the photos come my way. So to me, that was a wonderful part of the journey of writing this book.
Great. So what emerging technologies do you think will shape humanity in the future?
Well, I think we're in the midst of it now. I'm a little concerned about driverless cars right now. They sound great. You can just play video games as you're traveling. But if you learn a little bit more about their algorithms, particularly about the algorithms that are activated during an accident, there's a lot of ethical questions that are being addressed, but I don't know if ethicists or philosophers are involved in the coding of these things. So technology is great, but it's kind of making decisions that may not be in its wheelhouse. And so I'm a little concerned about simple things like that. And so that's the reason why I wrote The Alchemy of Us, so that we can feel more comfortable critiquing technology, because if we can critique old technology, we can use that as a gymnasium as well, if you will, to build that muscle, so that when future technologies or more advanced technologies come our way, that we at least feel emboldened to ask questions about that. So that's a simple example of one of the things I'm concerned about.
Great. So this is an interesting question because I feel like it reflects a common struggle in the 21st century. To what extent do you think we should try and resist the ways that technologies reshape us? How can we best assess the benefits and the harms?
That's a very good question. I haven't figured that out completely. I do know that I take a break from technology. So a lot of religious traditions have a day of Sabbath. And so I try and take a technology Sabbath, a couple of hours on Sunday. Look, don't try and text me or tweet me, or because I'm not going to be on the computer. I'm trying to give my brain a rest. So I think as a writer, I can take a lot of actions to not move into the direction that technology wants me to move, because, well, the tools I need are a word processor and a printer. And I like, and that's what works for me. But you just have to make some decisions about what technologies you want to embrace. Learn a little bit about what are in the terms and conditions now that you've adopted this app, or now that you've bought this technology. What information are you giving away? Make sure you don't just check that box, maybe read it. If there's a way you can tailor what gets sent to the application or not, definitely be engaged to do that. But I think it's a personal decision, and you have to do it each step of the way. That would be my best answer.
I know you're not looking at the Q&A right now, but I have the Q&A and then the chat open, and someone in the chat said, Mary Lou B says, as Anissa's high school teacher, I'd like
my high school teacher
her on her new book. I read it and loved it.
See, English and science, good stuff.
They go together.
They definitely go together. Miss Bednarski rocks. Yeah.
That's really sweet. And another person asked, speaking of high school teachers, another person asked, how would you recommend a high school student uses your book?
Well, get a chapter, read a chapter with your friends, and discuss it. And say, what would I do differently? And how do you think it's affecting me? And do you think this is a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Debate it, talk about it. Choose one of your chapters, and that's what I would do. I would just have a bunch of friends and just kind of debate it. Get an Alchemy of Us club where you talk about a different chapter each couple of weeks, and also do some follow-up stuff. In the back of the book, I have annotated bibliographies where I list where I got the materials and where you can get more information. Look that up. Fill in the gaps. Don't listen to what I say. This is my point of view. That's the other thing that I try and get across in The Alchemy of Us. I read all these other books and read what people had to say. And when I took a stab at looking at the same topic, I wrote a different book. So when you read these materials, you're probably going to have another perspective too. So read a chapter, debate it with your friends, and then go follow up with the materials. Maybe build a Wikipedia page for some of the people who are missing, and also let other people know too. So that's what I would do. It's kind of fourfold, I guess.
Great. So we really only have time for about one more question.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find a way to combine all of them, but there are a lot of questions about technologies and COVID-19. One is about examples of red lights to tell your body it's nighttime because we're all indoors all the time. Another question is about how do you think the digital technologies we've grown dependent on during the pandemic will reshape us? And there are a lot of questions
There's a
about
lot of questions.
light.
Well, for the lights, I mean, it doesn't even, it has nothing to do with being in a pandemic. When this is over, get blue lights, blue LEDs, and get red LEDs. And you're allowed to go for a walk, you know, at least as long as you're social distancing, go outside and get the sun to reset your clock so that you go into daytime mode. And then at night, those blue lights, just dim them so that you don't get a lot of blue light, so the melatonin isn't rising in your body. And if you can get redder lights or old incandescent bulbs, that will put you into nighttime mode. But this is also the time where we should be getting a lot of sleep anyway, because it helps your immune system. And the second question that you said, Hannah, I forgot.
Oh yeah, it was about our reliance on digital technologies.
Oh, our reliance. Yeah. This pandemic is terrible. But I do think that it's going to allow us to rethink a lot of things. We're learning about inequities in our healthcare. We're learning a lot about ourselves. This pandemic is providing a mirror. But also, we also get a chance to reset our relationship to a lot of things. Maybe after this, I won't use my cell phone as much and I want to take more walks. I can't wait to take a long walk. I can't wait to go swimming. A lot of things that I've been doing kept up in the house, I won't want to do. So we had to swing to one end of the pendulum with the pandemic, and as a response, when we are free, we may swing to the other end, but somewhere we'll find some middle ground, and that middle ground will be different than how we used to live life. And I think you should think of that as an opportunity. Our new normal should be new to all of us.
Great. Sorry, I had to turn off my video for a second. So everyone,
I do want to share one thing though.
Oh yes, I forgot to ask.
This is the vase. This is the vase. The one that fell on the floor. Well, people who are glass blowers lie a lot, and so I want to say it was this long, but it was actually about this long. But you could see that it was flattened on its side, and the lips were collapsed. So this is the vase that started me on this journey.
Well, not too bad of a recovery. Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us, Anissa. I feel like we all learned a lot about the history of science and innovations. And again, if you want to find the book online, just visit mitpress.mit.edu /books/alchemy-us. I know that's long, but you just go to our website. I'm sure you can find it.
That's right. Just type in Alchemy of Us, you'll find it.
Yeah. And again, we've provided the links to find out all the different places that you can find the book. There is an audiobook and an ebook, I believe.
That's right.
And you should be able to find links to that on our website or on the blog post about ordering alternate forms of the book. And that includes the links to where to find books that you can purchase from independent bookstores. All right. Well, thanks so much. That's it, everyone. And again,
thank you so much. Everyone stay safe, and thank you for attending this virtual tour.
Great. And again, you can tweet Anissa if you have any more questions.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Bye.